Remember when people were complaining about Starfield's optimization, especially on the CPU side, and all we got from Bethesda was this?
Why did you not optimize this game for PC?
We did. It's running great. It is a next-gen PC game. Upgrade your PC.
Well, the game was so optimized that a single patch gave it up to 50% performance increase. Even in the video that you're seeing right now in the screen, you have up to 40% increase just in this specific scenario. You can see that the CPU has much higher usage and it is consuming more power, of course, in the beta version, but that's fine since that happens in order to deliver more performance. Also, the card is an RX 7900 XTX, I just forgot to change the name in MS Afterburner. And this means that Todd and most of the gaming industry nowadays is full of shit. And full of shit mostly when they overhype their own games and then underdeliver, especially in terms of optimization, and they usually, overdeliver in terms of lack of love for their own games. Which is quite sad if you ask me, although maybe today's sponsor can brighten up your day. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you all the software deals you need, like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and even Windows Server 2022. For all of these, you can use my SKG discount code for 25% off, getting a Windows 10 serial key for only $16. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. Now, this is an open beta and it brings optimizations to the game, and it also brings DLSS and DLSS Frame generation. In order to download it, you have to go to your Steam, into your Starfield game options, beta menu, and select the available beta version. And then the game will update. And this update also fixed some issues with previous FSR implementations, but let's go to the performance first. Firstly, we have the RX 7900 XTX in Gagarin using FSR 2 to push the CPU a bit more. If you look at the results of the previous patch for the 3 resolutions, they are basically equal, indicating a huge engine bottleneck or game engine bottleneck. But as soon as we move to the new patch, we have some nice gains, in this case up to 27% at 1080p. As for the 4070 Ti, it had a considerable increase in all resolutions as well, especially if we look at 1440p ultra-wide, where going from 71 to 82 average FPS makes a lot of difference in terms of smoothness. At 1440p, when using FSR/DLSS, we can see that both cards got a considerable boost, with the XTX being the faster card of course, but now with the 4070 Ti having as much FPS as the 7900 XTX had before the optimizations. At 1440p ultra-wide it is more or less the same, with the 4070 Ti catching up a bit in the scenario in terms of percentage, decreasing the difference from 23% to 18%. Moving to new Atlantis, we have lots of NPCs, and the RX 7900 XTX was usually bottlenecked by the game engine, reaching a maximum of 88 average FPS at all resolutions. The game still lacks optimization of course, but it is now much better with up to 32% uplift in a single update. As for the RTX 4070 Ti, the FPS boost is still there, not as big as the one on the 7900 XTX because of course the card is less powerful, but still with up to 13% uplift. And when we compare both cards, we can see that the RX 7900 XTX was barely faster than the 4070 Ti here, since we're getting extremely CPU bottlenecked by the game engine itself and by the CPU. But when the CPU optimization got better, the RX 7900 XTX just shot up to 115 average FPS, being now 23% faster than the 4070 Ti. As the resolution goes up a bit, the difference gets even higher as the CPU bottleneck is also less, and the 7900 XTX is now, after the update, 32% faster, while before it was only 16% faster than the little 4070 Ti. And Akila is a city with lots of NPCs, so the engine bottleneck here at lower render resolution, since we're using FSR, is insane, with the card being almost locked to 75 FPS, which is ridiculous for a 7900 XTX. As soon as the update kicks in though, we get a massive FPS increase of up to 50%, from 75 to 112.5 FPS, which is amazing. In this same scenario, the 4070 Ti performed quite better with the previous update, maybe because it is an old game engine from Bethesda, and Nvidia drivers did work better with Bethesda games in the past, so maybe that's the case. But I can't tell for sure. Still, we had some nice uplift here of up to 27% at 1080p. And this is what I was talking about. In Akila before the update, the 4070 Ti was actually delivering 12% more performance than the RX 7900 XTX, possibly once again due to driver optimizations. But after the update, the RX 7900 XTX is now 8% faster, which is still not enough. Moving to a higher resolution, we have the 7900 XTX now being 16% faster, while it was slower before as well. And please don't come to me with dumb comments like, oh, the 4070 Ti is now matching the 7900 XTX, AMD is dead, AMD sucks.
Stop it. Get some help.
What you saw before happened here because I, on purpose, used upscalers in order to force a massive CPU bottleneck and see how it affected both brands here. Because as soon as we go to 1440p native, even with the previous patch, the 7900 XTX is faster. But still not by much due to poor optimization, something that changes with the new patch, with the RX 7900 XTX being 23% faster and still being CPU bottlenecked, difference that increases as we go to 1440p ultra-wide, where the RX 7900 XTX was already 18% faster without any updates, but is now 27% faster. And I believe the difference would be even bigger at 4K. So no, the 4070 Ti is not matching the RX 7900 XTX, it just does that when the game is being bottlenecked by the CPU performance. Moving to Maheo I, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced anyway, the performance was already much better from the start as it doesn't have as many NPCs to sink in the CPU performance, so we had a mild increase of up to 22%. It was more or less the same for the 4070 Ti, where the general uplift was around 10%, which is not that bad actually. In the scenario, we still have a CPU bottleneck with both cards, and that can be seen by monitoring the power draw while playing, but the 7900 XTX was already faster than the 4070 Ti here by 16%. At 1440p ultra-wide though, the 4070 Ti did gain some ground and went from delivering 81% of the 7900 XTX performance to deliver 85% with a new beta update. In fact, interesting. And well guys, as you saw, the update did increase the CPU performance or the game engine bottleneck in terms of CPU, let's say that, by a lot, up to 50% performance increase with the 7900 XTX when we went in cities like Akila with lots of NPCs. The performance uplift was huge because the game was heavily, and I repeat, heavily CPU bottlenecked by the game engine. But according to Todd from Bethesda and Xbox, it was everything fine, everything was fine, it was performing like crazy, it was performing very well, and all you need to do is get a better GPU, which is not the case obviously because the bottleneck was not the GPU, was the CPU in terms of game engine performance. And as soon as they optimize, so one optimization patch only, and we have up to 50% increase with the 7900 XTX. So you could just simply go there and say, well, the game was kind of rushed. We thought we could actually land the best performance possible by this date, but we couldn't. But we will be doing some optimization patches and the performance will get much better. You could just say that. People wouldn't be as mad if you just said that, but no, you just had to go in and say, no, this game is perfectly optimized, the problem is you, the problem is your GPU, the problem is your computer, while we can see right now that the problem is not our computers, the problem was and is still the CPU optimization or the overall game optimization of Starfield. And I'm telling you right away that it still has room to improve, because if we look at the power draw, if you look at the GPU if we look at the GPU utilization for most parts of the game, especially cities with lots of NPCs like Akila, New Atlantis and so on, even if we're running at, let's say, 1440p ultra-wide native or 1440p native, even in those scenarios, we see that we have a CPU bottleneck, the GPU is not being properly utilized, and the FPS numbers are not where they should be. But still, the optimization patch was well welcomed, and I'm glad to see that Starfield is performing better and better as time passes by. Finally. And just to finish this video, the FSR 2 implementation in the game was also improved, because the FSR implementation was fine, but then they updated it and it went bananas, so lots of shimmer, lots of artifacts, something that wasn't happening before in the first place. So they released the FSR implementation well, then they messed it up, and now with this beta update, they finally fixed it as well. So no more those shimmering artifacts that we had. We still have shimmering, of course. Even with the DLSS and the DLSS frame generation, we do have shimmer. The DLSS kind of fixes most of the shimmer, but it still has shimmer in some scenarios, and it definitely has more motion artifacts than FSR 2. So it is better in terms of shimmering situations, but in terms of motion artifacts, FSR 2 is actually slightly better than the DLSS, at least in this game. Frame generation also works quite nicely, and once again, if you're being CPU bottlenecked, frame generation can help to a certain extent, because it kind of ignores the CPU bottleneck, because you are injecting fake frames. The same for FSR frame generation, it is exactly the same. You're injecting fake frames over the game engine, so it is not the game engine that is producing those frames, it is your GPU that is producing those frames. So if the game engine has nothing to do with it, the CPU won't have to do any kind of work, and if the CPU doesn't have to do any kind of work, you can't be CPU bottlenecked by the game engine. So the DLSS frame generation does help quite a bit. It still has, well, it still has more artifacts than I would like. Artifacts in terms of moving the camera, so motion artifacts, some kind of, basically we can see the trail of the image going down. I don't really remember how to say that in English, and I hope that when the official release comes out, the DLSS frame generation is much better by then, and I do hope that FSR frame generation, FSR 3 and frame generation implementation doesn't take that much longer as well, because the game was sponsored by AMD, and it's still having frame generation on the Nvidia side first compared to the AMD side, which makes absolutely no sense. I guess that AMD is sleeping. Let's go now edit this video, render it, and release it for you guys to see. Thank you very much, guys, and see you in the next video, which will be a slight and small recap of the new AMD Fluid Motion drivers, the preview drivers, to see what they actually bring more on this new update. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.